Good morning, everyone. My name is Anthony Ruggiano Jr. I want to welcome everybody to Reform Gangsters Live. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Also, don't forget to check out my Patreon. Membership started at $1. There's a lot of good content on there. And also, there'll be more information coming out soon about my trip to Vegas in August 6th to the 13th. I'll be doing some shows at the Bar Museum, so stay tuned for that. So I already have some questions here that people have been sending in. Let's get started here. Of course, I guess because I'm going to Vegas, people are sending in questions about casinos in Vegas. And the first one is about the movie. Is the go-to Vegas mob movie, was it accurate, portraying Nicky, the part Joe Pesci played, compared to the real mob guys you knew in Vegas? What they said about him is true. He was out in Vegas. He was, a wild man, killer, dangerous. They found him dead in a cornfield with his brother. I mean, that was all kind of true. That was all true. The mob did run Vegas. I mean, I went there on my honeymoon in '77 in October. I was sent there by Neil Della Croce, the underboss of the Gambino family, and Joe the Cat, a made member of the Gambino family. That was their wedding present. Part of their wedding present for me was a trip to Vegas. I had a suite in Caesar's Palace. People were waiting for me when I got there. I had a line of credit, and I was treated like a king. You know what I mean? And I was only 20. It was 2 weeks before my 24th birthday. I had like carte blanche in Las Vegas. I had every door was open to me. I went to see the best shows in Vegas. I got treated great. The next question, this is a good question. It's funny because I did. Did you ever cross paths with Lefty Rosenthal or Tony Spilotro? I never ran across Tony, but I did meet Lefty. So at the end of the movie, I believe they had him living in California, but he was really living in Florida. And he actually used to come. He was in my father's restaurant a few times, having dinner. So I did meet him a couple of times, but I didn't know, much about him back then. I just knew he was a major gambler, bookmaker, and all that stuff. And he was out of Vegas, so he did. I did run across him a few times. That was kind of cool when I saw the movie, and at the end when they talked about him living in California, I forgot who I went to the movie with. My friend Dawn, I went to the movie with. I saw that movie in Sheepshead Bay Theater when it first came out with a friend of mine named Dawn, and at the end, I told her I had met him, and that was it was a cool movie, very true. Was the Vegas mob more Wild West compared to New York, or was it more corporate? The mob guys in Vegas were from all over the country, so it was when I was there, I didn't see any Wild West shit. Of course, we know bodies were getting buried in the desert. I mean, I think a lot of crews had guys out there, but there was nobody from Vegas that was there. They were all implanted there to Vegas, And the next question kind of clears that up. Was Vegas ever considered a place guys from New York got sent for money, punishment, or hiding? I know of one guy that got sent there by the Gambino family. He was a made member, Tony West's son, a baby John's brother, alleged the Ganoli King now, but his older brother, I think his older brother's name was John. He was sent there by the Gambino family. He was a made member of the Gambino family. He was Tony West's son, Charlie West's nephew. He was sent out there. He stood out there till he died, representing the Gambino family. I know of other guys that moved out there, associates that moved out there, that made money, that worked out there. I don't know of anybody that went out there as punishment. I mean, what kind of punishment is that, being sent to Las Vegas? I would like to be punished like that, but I do know of guys that went out there representing mob families. And one guy I know went out there to hide Cuccio. We all know his story with Robert Angle. Robert shot him in the head. The bullet didn't penetrate his skull. He jumped out the window. He got hit by an ambulance. That's the whole story for another day. He actually went out to Vegas to hide and actually thought there was hitmen coming after him, and he murdered some innocent people, and he went to prison and died. So, yeah, that's a pretty good question. Here's some mob trivia questions. In Casino, they showed a boss of Kansas City watching everything from afar. Was that kind of destruction real? I mean, all them families had pieces of Vegas. We all know that through the Teamsters. That was touched on in the other movie, The Irishman, and Casino. You couldn't. The Teamsters invested a lot of their union funds into Vegas. So yeah, all the families had pieces of Vegas, just like Cuba. When Cuba, before Castro, all the families had a piece of Cuba. I know guys that actually worked. Tony Lee's cousin Sonny actually worked in Cuba, in the casino in Cuba. He was a pit boss there. So yeah, that's pretty much all the families had their hands in the pot. Most people think the mob lost Vegas in the 80s. What really changed? Was it law enforcement or just smarter business from corporations? I guess it was my opinion, it was probably a combination of both. I mean, definitely the law enforcement, the federal government got them all out of there, and the corporations moved in. When they went after the Teamsters, they went after Hoffa and everybody, and they got the Teamsters cleared up. They got Vegas cleared up, just like they went after everybody. They got the mob out of the Kennedy Airport. They got the mob out of the fish market. I mean, they got the mob out of Vegas. Once the government stepped in, they cleaned up everything and they took over. The corporations paid big taxes. It's funny because yesterday I played the lotto, and it was, and I'm giving the girl at the lotto machine my numbers, my pick fours, my pick threes, and she's punching out the tickets, boom, 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 and all my lotto numbers, right? And I was with my daughter, and I took the numbers, and I walked out of the Publix, and I told my daughter, I went to jail for that. Now they got lotto machines in number spots. You know what I mean? So the government, they took over everything, including Vegas. The Godfather Part 2, Fredo dies in Lake Tahoe, but much of the family operation was moved west. Was the West Coast really considered safe or softer by mob standards? I don't really know that. That was Hollywood. The whole family relocated out to California. Whole families ain't relocating. They might have pieces of what goes on in other states, but that was all Hollywood. Frank Sinatra alleged mob ties and the role of the Rat Pack. How much of that do you think was real versus image? Like I said, the mob ran Vegas, especially in Sinatra's day. You know what I mean? You had to be hand in hand with the mob to play those places. They ran the show. They ran the casinos. They ran the hotels. They ran all the nightclubs in other states. They ran the Copacabana. So, Sinatra had heavy ties to the mob. You had to do business with the mob to play in those places. Here's another one about a lot of people don't know the Mob Museum sits in the old federal courthouse where the 1950s Kiefer hearings were held. That hearing basically exposed the Mafia to the public for the first time. Did your father ever mention that moment? Of course, many times. He talked about the Kiefer hearings. He talked about Valachi testifying, Costello, messing all that up. He definitely spoke about it. And, I was in the building. It's a really cool old building. There's actually a speakeasy in there. Then this other question was about Tony again, about his hole-in-the-wall gang that specialized in safe cracking. Well, those kinds of specialties, crews common in New York too, definitely. We had a guy around us named Ralphie, who later became a made member. He was a professional thief. He was actually the guy that robbed Zsa Zsa Gabor in the hotel in the Hilton in Manhattan. He wore a disguise. He used to wear disguises. He was a professional, definitely safe cracker, robber. So yeah, there was mob crews that did that without a doubt. Some of the biggest skim operations took place right under the noses of casino security. Was the skim ever something your father or friends talked about as being worth the risk? My father never had anything to do with that, so he never really talked about the skim, them skimming casinos. My father ran big major crap games in New York, that were just like casinos and made tens of thousands of dollars. Like I said earlier, the mob controlled all the crap games in New York at one time before the casinos in Atlantic City, and every family, and they had time slots. So in New York at one time in the 50s and 60s that I know about, in the 70s, there was a dice game going on 24 hours a day in New York in different boroughs, and all the mob families had a slot. Like when I first went to work in a dice game, our slot was in the afternoon. It was 12 to 3, 12 to 4, like that. It was in the Bronx on Gun Hill Road. And it was a $300 limit game, which was a big limit game back then. And like I said, all the families had a piece. The Genovese family and the Gambino family were the bankers. The Lucchese family were the Shylocks. The Banana family was the number runners. Every family had a piece. The Colombo family, they had a couple of guys on the payroll that got paid. They really didn't do much there. And so all the families made money. All the families made money. Do you think Vegas today is still influenced by the mob in any way? I doubt it. I mean, they might have pieces of strip clubs that are out there, and there's other stuff in Vegas, just like Atlantic City, that aren't in the casinos and the hotels. There's strip clubs, there's restaurants, and I'm sure those are mob, controlled by the mob. I'm sure the mob has things to do with that, without a doubt. Let's see what else we got here. Did I like the movie Leaving Las Vegas with Elizabeth Shue and Nicolas Cage? Yeah, it was cool. It was good. I enjoyed it. He won an Academy Award for it. Thank you. Thank you for the donation from I really can't pronounce this name. I really can't see it. I apologize for that. But here's the question: did Paulie Vario have a son who died in a fire accident? Paulie had a son that did die. I don't remember how he died. It might have been in a fire accident. It was quite a long time ago. It was in the early 70s. I actually remember his funeral mass was at St. Fortunato Church on Crescent Street, where my mother was baptized. But Paulie did have a son that died. But I really don't remember how he died. It could be in a fire accident. It might have been. I really don't remember, but I know he did have a son that died. And I thank you again for the donation. Let's see what else we got. Here we come. Here they come. Let's see. Is it true Joe Pistone was in the Colombos before the Bananas? I believe so. I believe he was hanging out with Colombo guys before he went over to the Bananas. I mean, he did get a couple of people killed. I think, was it? Yeah, he definitely was. This is from Short. Hey, hello, Anthony. I'm watching from Uganda. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Luciano. Hey, Mr. Ruggiano. Hey, how are you? Another guy, Wyatt. Welcome. I'm watching from Sydney, Australia. Sean. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Let's see what else we got here. From Martin, all the best from Newcastle, England. Thank you, Anthony. Keep up the good work. I appreciate that. Thank you. Here's another one from Luciano Ruggiano. Any plans of you doing the movie reaction in the future? I hope so. That's the plan. Is it true Joe Pistone was in the club? That's another question that I answered. Let's see. Are there any lessons from the mob rise and fall in Vegas? Yeah, greed. Greed's a killer. My old man told me a very long time ago that greed's like having cancer. I heard Philly Lucky. He received a phone call just prior to the fateful meeting on May 5th, 1981, to not attend. Don't know if that's true, but have you heard that? I never heard that. I know that Philly Lucky, had no business getting himself killed. The guy was a legitimate multi-millionaire, had a major cargo company in New York, but power's a drug. And he got himself killed. I was shocked when he disappeared. I couldn't understand it, and then it was explained to me that power was like a drug. If you had to pick chicken parm or lasagna for dinner, what are you picking? It's a tough choice. I kind of like my chicken parm, and I sort of like my lasagna. It all depends on who's making what. I guess in some restaurants I would choose chicken parm, and in some restaurants I would choose lasagna. It all depends on who the chef was. Did Fat Andy cultivate a number of businesses in Jamaica on his own, or did Gambino family give it to him? No, we had gone in Jamaica, Queens, was all cultivated on our own. This guy, Big Tommy, he took over the number business in Jamaica, and he was around us. That was all cultivated personally. Had nothing to do with anybody, with the Gambino family giving us anything. Boston Smitty's asking Anthony, any contacts with New England, La Costa Nostra? Just in prison, my old man did have contacts up there, with the family up there. I met a couple of New England guys in prison that I became friends with. That's about the only contacts I had up there. That's it. Just guys I met in prison. Thanks, Sean, for the donation. He says, Vegas, baby, keep up the good work. Thank you for the donation, Sean. I really appreciate that. Just hanging out, waiting for more questions to come in. Let's see what I got here. Here we go. Good morning. This is Sergeant Pleasant from the RSS Delray Beach. I was reaching out for, no, that's nothing. That's something different. Sorry about that. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. How do you think the guys being let out are going to deal with the changes in New York City? That's a good question. I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out. Don't forget the guys that are getting let out. A couple of them were cold-blooded killers. Tough guys, tough kids, tough men. Not men. They went away. They were in their early 20s. One of them did 30 years. It's going to be fun to watch. We'll see what happens, how it pans out. What are you looking forward to most about Vegas? I'm looking forward to the meet and greets. I'm looking forward to getting my story out there. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think people are going to enjoy the shows. I'm looking forward to meeting the people, interacting with everybody. It's going to be great. It's also my daughter's birthday, and she's coming with me. I'm looking forward to celebrating her birthday out in Vegas. It's going to be her first trip out there, so that's going to be really cool to be out there for her, actually on her birthday, which is August 9th. It says, Wikipedia says Jojo Carrazza had depression or bipolar. Is that true? Definitely true. He was a manic depressant, without a doubt. Big time true. Can you talk about Tony Plate and his death? That's a good question. He was very, very good friends with us. I met him on numerous times. So there was a bar on Fulton and Eastern Parkway that Freddie Hart's uncle owned. For many, many, many years, my old man and Tony held court there on Friday nights. Everybody knew that on Friday nights, Fat Andy and Tony ate dinner there. And, we had a big, big table, and this guy Aliuch used to cook. And when Tony Plate was in New York, he always came there on Friday nights, always. And I met him numerous times, a really good guy. Poor guy wound up being a co-defendant of Arnel de la Croce, and he was murdered, and he disappeared. Very wealthy guy, hung out at the Diplomat Hotel. And I remember after he disappeared, Lenny told me that was a sign for all of us to get out of that life. That the only reason why he died was because he was Neil's co-defendant, and the only way for Neil to beat that case is if he got out of the way. So they made up some story about him and John Gotti and Angelo Quack, and went to Florida and murdered him for Neil. That was terrible. What was Tony Lee's opinion of Mikey Gal? That's his brother. We all know Mikey Gal was a good guy, but they used to call him Balloon Head. He was a character. He was a character. Mikey Gal was Mikey Gal, man. You know what I mean? Like, I remember when they proposed him, they sat him down and told him to keep his mouth shut, don't say nothing, to calm down, because he had a big mouth. Who did you know in prison from the Patricia family? I knew a lot of guys. I don't even remember half their names. But I actually worked out with one of them. And for the life of me, I can't think of his name. Oh my God, I got a mental block. I used to work out with him all the time. It will come to me, and I'll get back to you on that. Happy birthday to my daughter. Thank you. I appreciate that. Did Gene Barillo ever sit on the commission? Definitely not. He was never even made, my cousin Gene. So how would he sit on the commission? Do you know any stories about? No, I don't. Oh, the leader of the Westies. This is a Russian name that this guy's giving me. But as far as I know, Coonan was the leader of the Westies. Kevin Kelly was my cellmate in school. Him and I became good friends. But I don't know anything about this guy's name. I can't even pronounce it. It's some kind of Russian name, it looks. How come JoJo was not killed if he was manic depressive? Come on. He was never hospitalized for it or anything. He was just, it was no secret amongst us that he had an issue, that he had a psych issue. Mikey No Nose is asking, did you interact with any other Gambino guys in Trenton, New Jersey? There was a captain out there that had a crew out there. They actually wrote a book about them. It was called Drop a Dime. Back then phone calls were a dime in the phone booths. And they hit out Little Joe and Robert when they were being indicted. They got indicted for a murder. So I only interacted with those guys. That was about it. Did I know Tato? I met him a couple of times. He was good friends with my old man. That was Sammy's guy. I did meet him a couple of times, yes. Thanks, Simon. I want to thank Simon for the donation. Thank you very much, Simon. It's all appreciated. The donations are really appreciated. Can you tell us the most dangerous man you met in the Mafia and who is not known to the public? Yeah. This guy, Irish Augie, he was around my old man. He was actually Irish, but he was like really dangerous. He used to keep a knife. He had this thing up his sleeve, and he was very, very dangerous. And he was not known to a lot of people. He was really dangerous. White House on 88th Street. Did you live in it? I lived in my house on 88th Street in Ozone Park. Grew up there. Fried Andy's house was on 88th Street, but it was never called the White House. What was the address of my house on 88th Street? 95, what was it? 9516 88th Street, Ozone Park, New York, 11416. That was the address of it, I believe. Yes. Did you have any dealings with the Dixie Mafia from the Carolinas or Georgia? No. But we did have dealings with Mafia guys from New Orleans with the construction business. My old man used to meet them in Florida at the Diplomat. That I know. from New Orleans. And Jojo Carrazza, speaking of Jojo Carrazza, he actually went to jail for, doing business with the guys from New Orleans with, slot machines. Did I know Anthony Mirror? No, but I knew his son, the lawyer. I don't know if I ever met Anthony Mirror. I may have met him a couple of times back in the day, but I can't remember offhand, but I do know his son, the attorney. Do I have any Purple Gang stories? I knew the Purple Gang. I knew them. I knew a couple of them. I knew, I knew they actually got my son a job when I got out of prison in 2004. They got my son in the Cement Masons Union, but he no longer is in that union. So I did know a couple of them. Very dangerous crew, very dangerous. Michael Melnis was dangerous. His brother, him and his brother were stone cold killers. That's why Michael was murdered. He defied them. He defied the Lucchese family. They made a lot of money with drugs, and they were very, very feared guys. Did the mob have any ventures with them? I went to church with a phone member. He would repent every day. I don't know what that means, but the mob definitely had interactions with, the Purple Gang. I've heard people say John had a guy in Rhode Island read around the one time. Any info on him? They had guys all over the place. They had guys in Rhode Island, they had guys in Boston, they had guys in Connecticut. I mean, did you ever go inside Big Paul's house in Staten Island? No, I never was in his house in Staten Island. The only times I met Paul Castellano was either in Jimmy Brown's club in Brooklyn or at my wedding. I never was in his house. I know my father was in his house on numerous occasions, and Tony Lee, but I was never in his house in Staten Island. Have you ever seen the movie Mob Cops? No, I didn't see it yet. I heard it's not too good. I know it's on streaming now, but I haven't watched it yet, but I plan on. But up until now, I haven't watched it yet. They killed my friend Eddie Leno. And actually one of them, we all know one of them played my old man in Goodfellas, in the beginning of the movie, which my old man was not too happy about. Why did Nicky break away from your father after he got made? That's a long story. That's a show within itself. It had to do with his brother Jojo. It had to do with releasing guys to them. It was a bad time in my old man's life. It broke his heart. But I'll tell that story at another time because I said it's a long story. It's a lot of detail. And I definitely will put that video out soon, so stay tuned. But they did make up at the end, a couple of years later. They made up in Petersburg, Virginia, in the prison visiting room. So that was all good. All right, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll be live again next week, and also for my Patreon members, tune in next Saturday at 7:00. We'll be watching the Gotti movie with Armin Asante, and we'll be talking about that. Members only. Don't forget, my memberships only start at $1, so check it out. You won't regret it. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves and everybody stays safe. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button. Check out the Patreon. Like I said, memberships start at only $1. And don't forget about Vegas. More information coming. And that episode about Nicky, I'm going to try to tape it this week and put it out there to you about the reason why Nicky broke away from my father after he was made, and how they made up eventually.